Hey everyone, welcome back to my series about how to improve in one-handed. In this part, I will cover how to approach each step of CFOP. So let's start in order with cross. The cross is easily the most abstract step of the solve, so naturally it's a bit difficult to give concise advice on how to approach it. One thing that I can definitely suggest is making sure that your cross solutions are actually comfortable to execute with one-handed. If I have this scrambled two-handed, I'd probably solve the cross like this by putting in orange and blue, FR, D2, then solving the red piece like this, and then finishing off the cross. But now if I try to do those same moves one-handed, it's actually pretty uncomfortable to execute. It would be much more comfortable to approach the cross a bit differently and execute it like this. That example kind of leads me into my next point, which is making sure you're not just limiting yourself to using R and U to build your cross. You want to use all types of turns, especially wide turns and F turns. So in this case, I have these two pieces, so I'd probably two-handed solve them like this to make a line, align them, put in the green, and then put in the blue. And one-handed, I'm going to do the exact same solution, but incorporate some wide moves, especially for this beginning wide R, R prime, to just make it easier to execute. And now a D prime, U prime, R prime, L2. Something else you definitely want to aim for is making sure that your solutions are as low move count as possible. So for a case like this, it might be natural to solve these three pieces and then just flip this last one like that. But playing around with the pieces, it's actually way more move efficient to do a solution like this. This once again shows just how important not limiting the types of turns you're doing is. Coming up with more creative and efficient solutions is something that is pretty difficult to get a grasp of at first, but the more you practice and the more you recognize the patterns of the moves that you're doing, the easier it'll get. When I got this cross in one of my solves, I was able to come up with this cross solution. I would have never been able to figure a solution like that out if I hadn't just messed around with this very standard 3-move insert to put in one piece and just playing around and seeing how the pieces moved every time I did it. Here's another example of a cross that may not seem too straightforward, but with some D, F, and wide U moves, it becomes much simpler. Once you improve a bit, you'll also want to be able to modify your cross solutions a little bit to make sure that your first pair is easier. In this example, we can solve the white cross and also set up this green-orange pair. Another topic to cover are X crosses. In general, I recommend if you aren't consistently sub 20 to not do too many, since at this level you should really be focusing on the previous things I just mentioned. That being said, if you do feel pretty comfortable with those other fundamentals, then absolutely go ahead and start doing that. They are really efficient, low move count, and will just make you faster overall. Now let's move on to F2L. This step is what usually makes or breaks your solves, so it's really important to get it right. Firstly, it's really important to have multiple solutions for each pair. The more comfortable you are with switching solutions for pairs, the more versatile and efficient you can be. Here are a few examples. For this pair, you can insert the corner first, and then solve the pair like this. But you can also hold it like this and do a back soon, and then insert the pair. For this pair, the main solution that I usually go for is this. But you can also do this, or this. You also want to make sure that your different solutions are from different angles. So for example, this pair can be executed like this. But if you're in this angle, you can also execute it this way. This case can be solved like this. Or if this back pair is not solved, you can also solve it like this. If you have to insert a pair into the front left or back left slots, it can be really useful and quick to do a Z rotation and execute them as R and U. So in this example, you have this pair, and if you do a Z rotation, you can execute it like this. Here we have this pair into the back left. And let's say you had triple sexy in the back like this. Next, let's talk about keyhole, which can be really useful for one-handed. Keyhole is basically just where you either have a solved edge or corner, and you solve the rest of the slot by misaligning the D layer, solving the piece that needs to be solved, and then realigning it. So in this case, the edge is solved in this pair, and we can solve the pair by misaligning the D layer, solving the corner. In this case, it's twisted in place, so we can twist it the right way, and aligning it back. In the case where the corner is solved, it might look something like this. An important thing to note if you're using D moves in your F2L solutions like this is that you can always choose between doing a D move or a wide U move. The reason this is so important is because doing a combination of these basically does a rotation. If you do a D move and a wide U move, that's just a rotation. You've basically gone from red front to blue front. Since one-handed is just handicapped 3x3, it can be pretty useful to be clever about how to do these rotations. As you get more advanced with keyhole, you can extend this into pseudo-slotting. I won't go too in-depth into that, but pseudo-slotting would be solving an equivalent piece in a different pair, and then when you misalign, solve the rest and align back, you would have solved two pairs instead of just one. In this case, the edge is solved in green-red, so I'm just going to insert the green-orange corner, misalign here, and then solve this pseudo pair, which would be these two. And now when I align back, these two pairs are solved. Another tip that's useful for F2L is being smart about how you use the F face. What I mean by this is that thinking a little bit outside of the box and using the F layer, you can come up with some pretty cool F2L solutions. An example of this is this pair, where you might normally just take it out, rotate, and then pair it up. But you can actually just do an F, and then you have this pair into the back right. Here's a different example where you can solve red and green by doing an R prime, and then you have this 3-move insert that you can do with F moves. My final tip for F2L is making sure you're orienting your last layer edges. Dot OLLs are really bad, especially for one-handed, and getting into the habit of doing this can help, especially if you plan on learning last layer Alex sets later on.
There's two ways to approach this. The first can be with your last pair. So in this case, if I insert this pair normally, I'm going to get a dot OLL. But if I insert it differently, like with a sledgehammer, I avoid the dot OLL and get a better last layer case. The other approach is doing it in the middle of your F2L. So in this case, I have these two pairs left, and the most natural way for me to solve these would probably be to do something like this. And then this. But then I get a dot OLL. And so what I'm going to do instead is solve this pair using a different solution that's going to change the edge orientation. In this case, it would be like this from this angle. And now when I go to solve the final pair, I have a better last layer case.
All right, now let's talk about last layer. A very common question I get asked is if it's worth it to learn full OH OLO and PLO. While it may be beneficial to relearn these sets for OH, I think the vast majority of the two-handed algs transfer perfectly fine to one-handed. There are of course exceptions, especially for PLO. The two that immediately come to mind are V-perm, where two-handed I do this, but for one-handed I do this. The other one is E-perm, where two-handed I do this, and one-handed I do this. My standard alg for those PLLs are pretty RUD heavy, and usually too many of those moves are pretty bad for one-handed, and you would much rather have an alg that is mainly RUL or RUF heavy. If you're not sure which algs are worth switching, I would recommend checking out these one-handed OLO and PLO documents that were shared through me through the one-handed Discord. Just go through the cases there and determine whether or not it's worth learning an OH-specific alg. I personally don't use all the algs that are on these lists, but I find the quality very high, so that's why I recommend it. Now let's deviate a little bit from traditional CFOP last layer. One of the first non-CFOP alg sets you might come across is COLO, where you have a cross OLO and you do a specific alg to permute the corners so that when you get to PLO, it's only edges left. The immediate benefit of this is that you avoid some really bad PLO cases. If you're only just starting out with one-handed, this can be super useful. Even if you're a bit faster, I would still recommend to learn COLO as it primes you to pay attention to corner permutation. Another similar alg set is OLLCP. It achieves the same thing as COLO, solved OLO and solved corners, but it's for any OLO case, not just the cross ones. There are way more cases for OLLCP than COLO, but I would still recommend knowing a few cases. Ultimately, I think the fastest last layer method is probably just going to be ZBLL. ZBLL is just when you have one alg to solve each cross-specific OLL case. The only issue with ZBLL is that there are nearly 500 cases, so it's something you should gradually build up towards. An intermediary set that is very useful for one-handed particularly is 2GLO. 2GLO comprises of all the cross OLLs that have the corners permuted. Since we're doing OH, anything 2gen is favorable.
Another thing that ZBLO helps with is avoiding bad OLL cases. There are a lot of line cases, for example, like this one, that are pretty bad to execute. But now we can just do a short setup into ZBLO.
With last layer, you want to make sure you're practicing your algs pretty regularly. The benefit of having the cases be algorithms is that you can write them all out and practice them in regular intervals. Now I'm going to close out this video by doing 3 example solves where I hope to cover most of the topics discussed in this video. Although these will be done on white and ignore first pair, dual or full color neutrality is very important, and if this is something that you are able to do, it will benefit you a lot. So in this scramble, I would solve the cross by holding the cube like this, putting in the blue, doing a wide R to put in this piece, F to put this piece in the right place, but first I'm going to do a U to put it on top, F, and then a wide U prime. And I'm going to do this pair. Then I have this pair, which I can do a Z rotation for. Now I have this pair, which I'm already in position to do. And then I see this corner, which must go with this edge. Now for OLO, this is the odd that I use. In this scramble, I would start by aligning the green with its center, putting in the blue, and then putting in the red, green, and orange. My first pair would be this one. Z rotation to finish it off. And here, this is going to be my next pair, and I would be in a Z rotation to solve it. So since I'm already in a Z rotation solving this pair, I could just do an X and then go into this pair. Next, I would do this pair, and then this one. For last layer, I know that if I do an F sexy F prime, I'm going to get my edges oriented and my corners permuted. So this will give me a 2GLL. In this scramble, I would first put the blue on top of the green, put in the green, do a D to put in the blue, then D2 to finish these three and put in the orange. Now I'm going to solve this pair. I'm going to rotate to solve these two. Z rotation to insert them. Now I'm going to pair these up, and a Z rotation to insert. Now luckily my edges are oriented, so when I insert this pair, I'm going to have a full cross OLL, and then I have a ZBLL case. That's going to be it for today. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed during this video or about the series in particular, please just leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.